When we got a diagnosis, it was almost this gradual sort of growth into panic. Evan was, when he was 3, he was completely non-verbal. He had some language at 2.5, and he lost it all at 3. So he had very little eye contact, difficult to engage, wouldn't respond to his name, and had never asked a question in his life. We got a consistent story of, this is it for life, this is what you've got. It's parents of kids with autism, 4 out of 5 will end up in divorce, and we got this sort of download of all this sort of these negative stories of the implications of autism. It was hellish. It was hellish in that it felt like you were kind of imprisoned in this dark cell, and there was no real escape out of there. And we heard about the Sunrise program through a parent who lived in Sydney. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. So we subsequently went to visit her and were just amazed by her daughter's progress. She'd been doing Sunrise for almost 4 years, and her daughter had entered mainstream school, and we just saw her come downstairs and say, "Oh, Mummy, I want to go next door and play with Amanda." I remember driving away in the taxi and saying to my wife, "This is what we're going to do." That was sort of a year down the track. We started doing the Sunrise program. We noticed language take off first, and then he started looking us in the eye. So then his interactive attention span started coming along. He was more engaged for longer. What you realise is that you're actually modelling in there, right? So your child, it's not so much the peripheral things that we use, like language, for instance. It's the attitude that we're beaming out to him. That's where the bonding occurs. That's where you get the connection, and that's where he's learning. So now, if I fast forward to where he is now, he's completely age-appropriate language, so he can talk the pants off you and asks questions no end. Many parents at that age will kind of say that's enough. So we will very rarely say that's enough of the questions. He's very communicative. He tells us he loves us. We tell him we love him, which wasn't supposed to happen. He's inquisitive about the world, so he wants to know more about the world. He's into sport now. Even 6 months ago, he had no interest in ball sports. And we're now talking about recovering our son from autism and just rejoicing in his progress and our growth. It's been a happy journey. So we're happy parents of autism, which is very much in contrast to what we see elsewhere, because we have quite a few families. We've had perhaps 30 odd families come through our house who have heard through the grapevine or otherwise, "What are you guys doing? I've heard about the Sunrise program," etc. And when they come through the door, you can just see they tell a very familiar story about their journey, which was very similar to our journey post-diagnosis. And they come in with a heavy heart. And we find that we're not in that place. We're in a different place, but we were there once.
It wasn't until he was 3 that we got a diagnosis, where they basically said to my husband, Daryl, and myself, that they were very sorry that our child had autism. And they suggested that we look at some centers outside of Boston. And I was like, well, outside of Boston, that's a long way from my home. And then I realized they were talking about residential. He was 3 at the time, and he's going to be 10 in February. And we began a journey of as many programs as you can think of. diets, biomedical interventions, alternative therapies, healers. We still weren't getting eye contact. We had a child with a lot of repetitive behaviors. We had a child who wasn't talking. After 7-8 years of searching and exploring, we came to Sunrise program. I did a startup program in December, and we started immediately our Sunrise program after that. I began to realize, even though I always loved my son dearly and deeply, I realized I loved Jacob, but I didn't love his autism. I had spent 7 years searching for a cure or recovery for his autism. And that is, Jacob was here and I loved him, and I hated that autism. It was over there. And it wasn't really part of him. And then the Sunrise program helped me realize that if I didn't love the autism and embrace it, I wasn't really fully loving my son. And I was like, whoa, that is the biggest light in my life. And when I began to love the autism as much as I love my son, and see my son and the autism as one, fully as a complete human being, not separating it, we began to see from Jacob, he started looking at us. He started using the toilet. He went from going from 30 seconds game to playing a game for 9 to 10 minutes. And I realized it was choosing to be happy, choosing my attitude, choosing to be completely with Jacob in the moment. Once we were going somewhere in the car, and he gets in the car, I put him in the car seat, and he sat there and he said, happy, happy, happy. I was like, yes, happy, happy, happy. If that isn't Sunrise program, nothing is. Over the last 9 months, we've seen more changes in Jacob than we had seen in all the programs we had done over the last 6, 7, 8 years. And I will also say that what came with the Sunrise program, that all these other programs I had done, all relationship-based programs that I had done, biomedical programs I had done, spiritual programs I had done, none came with the global community. We have friends now from all over the world: Australia, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Kenya. And so you come into the Sunrise program thinking you're going to find another way to help your child, and you do. And at the same time, you're really finding this amazing way to help your whole family. And you're not alone. You're embraced by this amazing community of people, Sunrise moms, Sunrise dads, who are accompanying you on this journey. So that's been a precious gift. It's a jewel, it's been a precious jewel for us.
My older son, Kaeo Jr., we found out he had autism when he was about 1.5 years old. They didn't want to give him a diagnosis because of his age at that time, but we got services immediately. And what it was immediately set up with ABA. And we didn't really know anything about autism. We were trying to learn everything we could. But what we saw through the months was that he actually started being more distant from us. The distance grew further. Kaeo Jr. would spend his days running back and forth all the time. He would not look at us. He actually didn't have any sort of, it seemed like he didn't have any awareness of anyone except maybe his mom a little bit. He actually had no language. He didn't have one single word before we found the Sunrise program. The first thing we ever saw on the website, the Autism Treatment Center of America website, was Ron Kaufman's webinar on the differences between ABA and the Sunrise program. Immediately we took some of the principles that we learned and we tried, and my wife tried joining him, and the first thing she did was she started running back and forth with him in the living room. And for the first time in his life, he looked up at her with a meaningful eye contact and he smiled like, wow, you're actually here. And he grabbed her hand and he pulled her, and they started running back and forth in the living room, and we were just so amazed and happy, and we couldn't believe it, and we knew that this was right. Everything just felt right in our heart. It was the first thing we'd ever done with him that just felt so right. And he was showing us how effective it was at the same time. So we immediately signed her up for the Sunrise Program's startup program. Up in the weeks before she even went to startup, we'd been trying to apply the principles that we were learning from what the videos that we saw of Ron Kaufman and so forth. And we actually got his first 10 words from him. It was just mind-blowing to us because we always categorized him as, yeah, we have a nonverbal child too. So in December, my wife went to the Sunrise Program startup. And while she was away, I converted Kaeo's room into a playroom. So as soon as she got back, we started our Sunrise program, and he just flourished. Just a few months later, by I think 3 or 4 months later, he had 150 words. He was talking in 3 and 4 word sentences. He would seek me out in the house and pull me into the playroom. And it was just like, you know, what I'd always dreamed of, having this relationship with my son. I felt it for the first time, that it was a reality and it could really happen. And, you know, it was happening. I found the path to true love. And it's just a beautiful thing, because I'm so excited I get to share that with myself and with my wife, with my son. You know, for the rest of my life, I can love completely. And that's like a priceless thing that I've gotten this week.
By the 4th day, he was so much more interested in what I was doing that he ditched his toys and it became an interactive game. 10 days later, he has 150 spontaneous words, and he had only had 6 when I brought him in the playroom. Trey's tantrums, now that we're doing Sunrise, are far fewer too. It started on May 1st, and by May 23rd, he was completely potty trained. In every aspect, language, eye contact, his attention span, flexibility has come a long way in a year. It's been pretty amazing. I have 2 boys. Evan is 6.5, and his diagnosis is autism. Trey just turned 5, and his diagnosis also is autism. They both regressed. They were born, were talking, and lost these skills and regressed into autism about a year apart from one another. When Trey first diagnosed, he wasn't even aware we were in the room. He could repeat anything we said as long as it was a 2 to 3 word phrase, no more than that. He could repeat it, but spontaneously to use language, he would only use about 6 single words. Trey loves to spell words since he was 3, can sight read, loves to line things up, loves to play with stuffed animals, but repetitively in certain routines. Trey used to tantrum. He had 0 flexibility. In fact, he developed this habit. He had to take a transitional object everywhere he went to just avoid a tantrum. So we would take things from the house to the car, from the car to the store, from the store, from a restaurant, he'd want to take the salt shaker. Like, he just couldn't leave somewhere without taking something new. And it got a little restrictive for us. We couldn't really go anywhere with him because it would turn into this full-blown 45-minute tantrum if we didn't allow him to take something. Having both of our boys develop autism definitely had a big impact on our family and our marriage. Certainly every parent goes through some sort of grieving process. I used to use the analogy that it felt like My house was burning down and my 2 children were inside, and I didn't know which one I should grab first. Should I grab the one near the door, or should I go all the way in and grab the one who I don't think is going to find the way out by himself? It definitely created a big strain. I came to the Option Institute for the Sunrise startup training in February last year. I left the startup and started a program for Trey, and I was doing 4 hours a day, just me, 2 2-hour sessions. He sat and did his letters and spelled his words and lined things up. And I was joining him in this activity, and by the 4th day, he was so much more interested in what I was doing that he ditched his toys and it became an interactive game. And I was surprised. I expected to join for months. So 4 days later, we're building games. 10 days later, he has 150 spontaneous words, and he had only had 6 when I brought him in the playroom. And 2 weeks after that, I think he had hundreds. I stopped counting. Trey's tantrums, now that we're doing Sunrise, are far fewer too. It's almost like as we built his language through Sunrise, he started to just understand more. I found the flexibility piece just comes into play smoothly at this point. I decided to potty train Trey. It started on May 1st, and by May 23rd, he was completely potty trained. In every aspect, language, eye contact, his attention span, flexibility has come a long way in a year. It's been pretty amazing. And that's with an intermittent program, because we've had to stop at times the formal program because of my other son's health issues. Using the Sunrise program, it's been extraordinarily effective.
My son Joseph is 6 now, and he is in a public school setting. My daughter is really exploding verbally. They are now actually starting to interact together. We came here for the secrets to fixing our son with autism, and really what we've come out with is something much greater than that. I really believe that if our son didn't have autism, and if we didn't come here to the Option Institute, our marriage would not have survived. I've got 2 children. My son Joseph is 6, and he has autism, a moderate form according to the doctors. And my daughter is Sophia, who is just turning 4, and she also has autism. A little bit more mild according to the quote-unquote experts. Before we started with the Sunrise program, Joseph had very little eye contact. He probably would have maybe 1 to 2 fleeting bits of eye contact in an hour's time. Somewhat verbal, basically just nouns and one-word utterances, although he was hyperlexic. So at the age of 2, he was able to read things like cat and hat and computer and refrigerator. But if I showed him a picture of a smile, he wouldn't understand what that meant. Joseph had a lot of isms or stims, and a lot of flapping of the hands or tweaking his fingers like this around his face. A lot of lining things up, and a variety of, we'll say, verbal, we'll say, screeches or sounds or clicks. Those were, the day was filled with those. As far as my relationship with my son, prior to the Sunrise program, I really didn't feel that he recognized who I was. And what I mean by that is he knew there was this big guy living in the same house as him, but I don't necessarily think that he understood that I was his father and that I was trying to reach him. And bottom line is I felt that I had no relationship with him on any kind of emotional level. That was probably for me the worst thing about his situation, about the diagnosis of autism, is that I felt that my son was taken away from me before I even got a chance to know him. Our daughter's situation was a little bit different in that she developed more skills than our son in that she was much more verbal. 2-word utterances, 3-word utterances, had more eye contact, and was generally more social, at least with adults. Her repetitious behaviors were more mild by comparison, and really she liked to line things up and arrange things, take a bunch of toys out of the basket, arrange them on the floor, and then put them back in the basket in a certain way. My wife and I, we started to play the blame game with each other. Whose fault it was? Why did this happen to us? Why is God or the universe against us? What did we do to deserve this? And we really drove each other apart because neither of us was in a positive space, and to some degree we blamed each other as well as ourselves for the situation that we were in. My wife's aunt handed my wife a book, The Sunrise, the Miracle Continues by Barry Neil Kaufman, and my wife read it and gave it to me, and she said, I need you to read this book. This is what we really need to be doing. So we signed up for the Sunrise Startup Program and came to the Option Institute. My wife and I were still in the grieving process of having our child taken away from us. And really what my motivation was to come here was to find the magic formula to fix my son. I came to fix my son, but realistically, I was the one who needed fixing. I realized that his situation isn't terrible for him. He's having a great time. The situation I looked at for myself was terrible. Having that realization did, I think, a couple of things for me. It allowed me, one, to get out of my way and really reach out to my son and accept who he was and try to make connections with him, which I was able to make connections with him. So that was my first goal, and I accomplished that within a month of coming back from the startup program. The marriage ultimately stayed together. We are still together. But it did take a lot of work. Part of what we did when we started coming to the Option Institute and the Autism Treatment Center of America was that it gave us the opportunity to look at ourselves and to look at what we were doing within ourselves and to each other in our relationship. And we saw that the things that we were doing weren't very loving and weren't very kind to either of us. And we took that opportunity and were able to change it. And change it for the better. And I really believe that if our son didn't have autism and if we didn't come here to the Option Institute, our marriage would not have survived. We've been following the Sunrise method for about 3 years now. My son Joseph is 6 now, and he is in a public school setting. He speaks in 4 to 5, sometimes 6-word utterances, sentences. He has great eye contact. We play a lot of games together. Enjoys being on my shoulders a lot. So we have a lot of fun, and I read stories to him to go to sleep at night. My daughter, who's just turning 4, is really exploding verbally. They are now actually starting to interact together. One of the most beautiful days for me happened recently. Went to the store and with all 4 of us, and we were putting stuff in the cart, and we're walking around the store, and my daughter's holding my hand. Decided to go to a restaurant for lunch, and we all sat at the table, and our children ate and got ice cream at the end. There was no screeching, there was no tantrums. It was really a very typical day. The Option Institute has been a real blessing for me and for my wife. We came here for the secrets to fixing our son with autism, and really what we've come out with is something much greater than that, and that's really the keys to understanding ourselves and skills that we can take for the rest of our lives with us, and hopefully get to the point where we teach that to our children as well.
I no longer have a child who feels he needs to scream to try to get our attention. He's more than willing to tell us. I think one of my favorite sentences was, "I want to swing and spin." And I was just like, wow! I want to swing and spin. That is 6 words. The tantrums are few and far between. He is completely comfortable with looking at you and smiling and sharing. It's just been amazing. He says, "I love you." And I was just like, oh my gosh, there it is, the moment I've been waiting for the last 3 years. The Sunrise program to run is, in many ways, liberating for a parent who is looking to gain control of their child's future. Yes, I have my life back, and yes, I do have a chance to grab my son and take him with me on this journey, wherever it is that we're going. My son Brendan is 4, and he was diagnosed with mild autism and PDD-NOS. Typically, Brendan had actually developed at normal pace. He had gained milestones like walking and crawling at a normal pace. He was doing sign language, because I made an effort to teach all my children early sign language. Started talking single words like mama, dada, all the typical stuff that 1-year-olds do. And then dramatically, I saw a decline about 14 months. The first thing we saw go was the sign language. The second thing we saw go was the eye contact. And then eventually I started to see a pattern of crying to wake up in the morning like he was crying to get my attention, as opposed to screaming mom. It was a mode of getting up, a mode of him getting my attention, a mode of getting what he wanted, a mode of telling us he wanted food, a mode of everything was screaming and crying, and of course a huge meltdown to follow when he did not get his way. As opposed to asking me for a bottle, he would go and try to open the fridge and work on the cupboards, and getting snacks. Anything that any other child would say, you know, mama, snack please, or, you know, milk please, or more please. He was literally becoming his own vessel to do things on his own, to avoid other human contact at all. And then my husband also noticed that he started lining up toys and doing repetitive behaviors. He likes to spin spoons and forks. He would love to get the forks and spoons down from the counter and spin them on the linoleum of our kitchen floor. And then he would do it on the counters, and then he would find eventually anything that was appropriate spinning. My husband caught him taking all the bathtub toys, pushing them to the back of the bathtub, and directly focusing his attention on the water spout, which is filling the tub at this time, and just going crazy in the water. Back and forth, he would just sit there. And before we realized it, as we're watching him, it's 20 minutes. 20 minutes of playing in the faucet of pouring water. And then my husband officially said, I think we have a problem. At first, God bless my husband, at first my reaction was, who do you think you are? How dare you look at our son and see something, anything less than perfect? And then when I really cued myself up to what my husband was pointing out, I realized, there really is a problem. He's absolutely right. And at that point, I pretty much plummeted into an area of life of regression and being angry and in denial, and wasn't sure what to do at that point. It was very weird to me that my son was intelligent, that my son was very advanced in certain areas, and that my son could learn. And I started realizing that the programs we were using, like speech and ABA and OT, were not really addressing the things that were important for me as a parent, which was the social aspect of life and of helping him bridge that gap. So at that point, me and my husband went on the search of, well, we know what we're looking for. We're looking for something that is going to teach our son to connect with other people. We're looking for something that's going to teach him that, it's okay to connect with us. You don't have to stay by yourself. So my husband had heard about Ron Kaufman's story and him actually recovering, or being a child himself that recovered from autism. And so my husband came home and said, look, we need to look this up. I don't know who he is. I don't know who Ron Kaufman is, but luckily we found Ron's interview with Fox News. That was a cascading spiral for us. As we listened to the 20-minute interview with Ron, and he was advocating for what the Sunrise program is all about and what the principles are, me and my husband went, oh, there it is. We got to get there. Whatever it takes, we need to get there. So I originally came to the startup. We've been running our Sunrise program for 14 months, and my son has way over a 500-word vocabulary. As opposed to the leading he used to do and the pointing and the crying, we hear things like, I want a banana. Come get me. Come chase me. Come tickle me. Tickle monster, please, because he loves to be tickled and roughhouse with. He is more than willing and been happy to tell us what he wants, which has been fantastic. It's taken a frustration level off of us completely, because I no longer have a child who feels he needs to scream to try to get our attention. He's more than willing to tell us. I think one of my favorite sentences was, I want to swing and spin. And I was just like, whoa, I want to swing and spin. That is 6 words. And I didn't even have to ask for it. I didn't even have to push him. He told me right off, this is what I want. And it was just like, wow, absolutely wow. His eye contact, of course, I don't even think we could measure. It was a 0 at that point. We had started him at the very beginning of the program as far as eye contact goes. But now we are working on, he can withhold, or I should say, he can give eye contact for 2 to 3 seconds long. He does frequency way past the 6 times a minute. Right now we are working on length, but his eye contact to learn his duration has just been dramatic, especially when he is highly motivated. He is completely comfortable with looking at you and smiling and sharing. It's just been amazing. Barry Neil Kaufman recently had asked us, can you please name some isms for your child? And I found myself going, I can't even think of any. So right now, at this moment in time, I cannot name something that is so repetitious that it stands out as an ism for us. Before his tantruming, that was a mode of communication for him. My son cried a lot. But now he's much more willing to use words. And even if he does, get a whine to him, and I look at him like, well, you can talk and tell me what you really want. And he is more willing to think and pause and go, I want orange juice, or I want apple juice. And it's like, yes, that's exactly it. The tantrums are few and far between. And I really began to question whether I would ever hear my son call me mommy or tell me that he loves me. Just say, I love you, in any shape or form. And I got my wish for that. And during Christmas of last year, he has bunk beds, and he climbs into his bunk bed, and we tuck in and we do the little things that we do to say goodnight, which is kisses. And I gave him a kiss. I said, give me a kiss. And he willingly gives me a big pucker, and we give a big kiss, and he beats me to the punch, and he says, I love you. And I was just like, oh my gosh, there it is, the moment I've been waiting for the last 3 years. I went to bed floating on air. You know, it's 3 simple words, you know. I think my biggest change overall for me would be the acceptance of who Brendan is in all aspects, including his aspect of the fact of his diagnosis of autism and PDD and OS. The Sunrise program to run is in many ways liberating for a parent who is looking to gain control of their child's future. For me, ABA was not liberating in any way. It was a chore. I found myself having to look for people to do something that nobody enjoyed. It was almost like being let go out of jail. I mean, that's exactly how I felt. It was like, yes, yes, I have my life back, and yes, I do have a chance to grab my son and take him with me on this journey, wherever it is that we're going.
A few weeks ago, I was leaving his playroom. Somebody was coming in after me, and I always say to him, when I leave, I'll see you later, Charlie, I love you. And I could see him trying to piece the words together and what I was going to say, so I kind of just stood there and, kind of watched him process it, and then he just said, I love you, Mommy. And then I attacked him with hugs and kisses. And I think he was like, whoa, might not do that again. And then, and I told the whole world. And then last week, he was going to bed, and I was up in his room with him, up in his room, and my husband walked out and he said, the same thing, good night, I love you, Charlie. And I watched Charlie do it again. I watched his face think about it and form the words, and he said, I love you, Daddy. We never, ever, ever thought we'd ever hear those words. And it makes everything worth it. Before sunrise, he made eye contact. It was fleeting. Didn't use words by choice. If he wanted something, it was a whine or a cry, or he would grab my hand and pull me to the kitchen and just whine. Never any words, although he had words from his ABA training. He knew how to label a bed, a couch, a cat, a dog, but he never had functional language. I've been running a full-time Sunrise program since March of 2011, a little over a year. Within weeks, he realized that language is much more powerful than crying and whining, and began to use this language in a much more functional way. The tears went from all day, every day, to what seemed like appropriate tears for a 7-year-old. If he fell down and got hurt, he cried, but it wasn't his way of communicating anymore. And that happened within weeks. And his anxiety since then has completely gone away. He tries new things. He tries to play with his sisters and her friends that come over. He tries to climb the swing set outside and successfully does it, but he never even tried anything before. So he tries to speak, and he tries to talk, and he tries to play, and he successfully does a lot of those things now. We have like a little boy in our house. We have little conversations in our house. He never had any sort of seemed to understand us, or definitely did not speak, reply to us before. And he does that now. It's the best thing that's ever happened to our family.